Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. It's been a while since I've had the gentleman on my left on the show. If you don't know who he is, you should go back and do a little research. Okay, I'm cheating. Verron Haynes, former running back for the Steelers, joins me. Verron, thank you so much. It's been a while. I had you on the show before, and I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about the 2020 draft. We'll talk about Bud Duprees' situation and the comparables between him and Shaq Barrett, who led the Buccaneers in tackles and sacks last season. And I kind of wanted to segue into that. Why? Because talks have not been really massive right now between Bud Dupree and the Steelers organization. Last year, Shaq Barrett for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And historically, Shaq Barrett came over from the Super Bowl 50 winning Denver Broncos to fill a void and to be that pass rushing maniac, which he proved in Tampa Bay last season, being a solid player. And then Matt Judon, who played with Baltimore, making over $16 million this season. Bud Dupree's coming off of a career high 11.5 sacks. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why he hasn't signed any type of tender. And then he signed a grievance with the NFL against the Steelers saying, I want to change my designation. What do you make of all this? Are the Steelers going to work something out between them and Bud Dupree? Or are they just going to let him go? Or is this like a last-minute deal because of the numbers that Bud Dupree is watching and looking very closely? Of course, him and his agent trying to do their best bet to center themselves in such a situation that will allow for him to stay in Pittsburgh for at least the next 2 or 3 years.
Rudy, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's been a while, like you said. I appreciate you calling up, and always a pleasure to be on, right? Steelers, home, fantastic organization. With that being said, I think it plays in his favor the longer it goes, right? Everything is unfolding. You see the kind of numbers getting thrown around, and I think it works in Bud Dupree's favor. The one thing I can tell you about playing for this organization, one, it helps you off the field, right? As far as you're going to make more money being a Pittsburgh Steelers with contract negotiation, with commercials, endorsements. You'll have extra money every year. You're going to have a chance to go play in the postseason. I think that's fair to say. You're going to be in the running, and in my opinion, I think you take all that into perspective whenever you're talking about contract negotiation. Now, here is what Bud, we don't know about Bud, whether what is all the intangibles that plays into his saying yay or nay in his grievance or moving forward with that, whether it's the family, whether it's his viewpoints on he's put in the work, we don't know. I would like to think that he is seeing that he is in a 3-4 and he's getting and he is ranked like a defensive end, but he's not getting defensive end kind of money, and that is be it. But that's not fair to me to say. I don't know what all his agent and him is saying, but know this. That Steelers organization gives you credibility beyond the field. So that money that you are could be when it gets down to the boiling point where you guys are close. Now you got to look at it in perspective as, can I make this up off the field as well? And whenever they're close, I think you'll see a big difference in the way that they communicate with each other.
Yeah, I hope so. I really think that
he's a great player.
Yeah, no, he is. He's a solid player. And, you know, the year prior, his numbers weren't very good. There was not a lot of production, missed a lot of tackles, wasn't getting inside of the interior, just barely missed by the hand, things of that nature, real mechanical football IQ kind of things that people were really questioning whether or not he was going to be a bust, as well as guys like Jarvis Jones, you know, who proved to be a bust for the Steelers as well in some capacity. I met Jarvis, and I was really impressed with him as a person, but that doesn't get the sacks. It doesn't get the endorsement money. It doesn't allow for the organization, whatever organization you play for in the NFL, that allows for you to say, you know what, this is what it's all about. I'm producing off the field. I'm producing on the field. I'm producing in the community. I don't think that's being talked about enough from an individual player standpoint. However, when it comes to where Bud Dupree is now versus where he was last year, Bud Dupree did not have a great season prior to last season. But this year, I mean, at 11.5 sacks, are you kidding me? He filled the void for Stephon Tuitt, because Stephon had a torn pectoral muscle, which kept him out of the better part of last year. Bud stepped up in a way that he was asked to step up. He performed immensely. He had multiple sacks. His football IQ stepped up. His athleticism just became that much better. It's hard to fill a void from guys like Stephon Tuitt. Hashtag do it to it, with one of my favorite defensive players alongside of guys like Cam Hayward and the like. But I think Bud should really look at this from a more global perspective. I can't speak for him, but and no one can. Only his agent can really speak for him on top of himself. But I look at Bud Dupree as one of those comeback player of the year type conversating players when you talk about Steelers defense. And of course, they went and kind of traded off their first round pick for Minka Fitzpatrick, and we'll talk about that in half a minute. So Bud Dupree,
that ever work out well?
Boy, that was the best first round trade I probably have ever seen in Steelers history, outside of what the Steelers did acquiring Jerome Bettis. Nice. From the St. Louis Rams. At least in St. Louis, they were in St. Louis at that time, and I spoke to Jerome extensively about that. Again, historically, his numbers were good with the Rams, but became a Hall of Famer, 6-time leading rusher for the Steelers. So that trade seemed to work out perfectly. And I see that alignment switching into Minka Fitzpatrick's conversation and him playing out of position for the Miami Dolphins. In 2018, I was in Arlington to interview Minka Fitzpatrick, who, by the way, Roll Tide for him, and he rolled into some serious money, but playing out of position in Miami. And I've mentioned this a couple times on the show throughout this past year. I like Minka Fitzpatrick. I think he's an absolute stud. He's a great guy. He's great for the community. And clearly his insertion into playing a natural position in the cornerback 3-4 or 4-3, the guy, or even in the nickel, has just proven to be an absolute terror for defenses. Once he figured out the chemistry of that secondary, along with Joe Hayden opposite, I like the fact they gave up a first-round pick. I'm not too much of a fan of what Ryan Clark had said in regards to, what are you doing? Why would you trade this pick away for a guy who's playing in a horrible Miami Dolphins secondary? And I just shook my head and said, just wait, because again, knowing a little bit about Minka, looking at his background, playing for Bama, things just kind of roll when you have Nick Saban as your coach.
It does. And I'll give you one. It's a twofold kind of thing. One, I'll go back to when we were talking about Bud. The other side of that line, he has a pretty good guy rushing too. So that helps his case, Watts. I think him coming into his own and just being a freak of nature, which he has turned out to be absolutely sensational on our line. I love the energy that he brings. So that whole nucleus is coming back to me when we play. I see the energy out there. I see them gelling. I see them getting like really, really cohesive bond going on where they're winning games. Sometimes out there with the lack of Ben out there last year, you could see it was in the defense's hand to shut these guys down, and that's what they did. And that in itself was the way that we played. When Ben first came in the league, we asked him to pass 13, 14 times a game. That was a lot, his rookie year. But he's evolved into who he is now and is an exceptional quarterback. But the defense took over last year and stepped in a few games where it was fun to watch the old Steeler defense run around and just cause havoc out there. And to the scouting and the front end department, they did a fantastic job of recognizing talent where it was and giving up that first round pick.
Yeah, definitely. And Minka fits the mold perfectly. He has the attitude, he has the athleticism, and he showed it all season last year. And now, obviously, Stephon Tuitt is injury free now. That pectoral muscle is healed. He's done rehab, and right now the NFL looks a little bit different than it did last year. And I don't want to drag COVID into this, but to be quite honest with you, when I looked at practices, no training camp for the first time in 50 years for the Steelers, who would have it at Chuck Noll Field, which you've been on multiple times for quite a few years. Yeah, it looks very different. And I know the interaction between the players and the fans is completely electric. And I was there in 2014 in Latrobe, and it doesn't have the same feel right now in regards to the NFL season, since all training camps, not just the Steelers training camp, but all training camps have been closed, and now they get to practice at Heinz Field, which I don't think is a really bad thing, to be honest with you, because that gives them the real-time game feel in the stadium. What advantages do you see them playing at Heinz Field versus the disadvantages of not having the fans at St. Vincent?
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the most influential things and shocking things to me was them moving to Heinz Field, right? And it's a plus in the sense of, if you're a younger guy, you haven't had that experience and you've only heard about Heinz Field and the magic that it transpires over there, it gives you an opportunity to go in there and see it firsthand for yourself. The older guys, welcome back, right? Knock the cobwebs off, let's do it. We're back in the thick of things, and it kind of pick back up where you left off, which was a good situation moving into the latter part of last year. And I just see it like right now the gravy train is rolling. The gravy train is rolling with the Steelers, especially on defense. You add in there a Ben Roethlisberger coming back, a hungry Ben Roethlisberger that wants to prove some things and still has he wants to silence a few doubters out there. You have a great, well-oiled machine that's hitting on all cylinders by the time we start up.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But last year, what was the real shiner for the Steelers? Obviously, you'd mentioned Ben Roethlisberger, him, being injured. He's done for the year with the insertion of Devlin Hodges, with the insertion of Mason Rudolph. It was almost as if you could put those guys together, you would have yourself one dynamic, close to, ball slinger as you can, that Ben Roethlisberger brings on the field. I don't know how secure that second spot is. I guess we're going to find out when training camp transpires at Heinz Field. But I think the offense, and that kind of segues into the 2020 NFL draft, which was pretty good for the Steelers when you're talking about draft picks and things of that nature, getting more aggressive offensively and acquiring. You got second year Deontay Johnson, who had who held some records in his rookie year, receiving balls from Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, for that matter. The duck caller, I think Claypool's a serious duck call coming out of Notre Dame, an absolute beast. Matter of fact, when he was drafted, he posted a photo of him as a blocking tight end shoving someone into the ground, which I thought was quite interesting. He's a 3-year starter for the Fighting Irish. We've had, again, success with Stephon Tuitt, who's now he has a fellow alumnus on the other side of the ball. But he had 13 touchdowns, 28%. He was targeted there. He's one of those fantasy nightmares for those guys that really want to talk fantasy out there. I'm not really into fantasy. I'm more into reality. But I do like fantasy when you're talking about points and players, and, of course, with the NFL season looming, and hopefully the NFLPA and the NFL will work something out in regards to protection, similar to that of what the NBA is doing by sticking players in Orlando, giving them rings to test their temperature, distance, things of that nature. So hopefully the NFL and the NFLPA really come to terms with something over this upcoming week, or players aren't going to play. And to be quite honest with you, I don't blame them for not
Yeah.
doing it, because safety over money, especially when some of these guys have families to go back to. Some of the younger guys may not, but some of the veterans, do. Ben Roethlisberger,
Yep.
the laundry list of guys who are on that line. Alejandro Villanueva, clearly has his own family coming out of the military. But when I look at this 2020 draft, I think Chase Claypool kind of fits the almost, and I don't want to compare him to Hines Ward, because Hines is a whole nother animal and plays but the play is very similar in the fact that he's going to be a nightmare for guys thinking that they can just knock him down. I mean, the guy's 6'4", ran a 4.42 40-yard dash. Clearly, he's just an absolute beast. He's got a very long, extensive reach and great hands. Do you see him in special teams, maybe to kind of warm up, so that way he can go into that next, being that next number 3 wide receiver?
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about Juju in a minute as well.
Absolutely. You forget Hines. That's where Hines earned his keep at first too. He made his presence very well known on special teams first, and then he came into his own himself. So that wouldn't be a bad start for the guy. He'd be falling in some good company there, and I would highly suggest that he takes that with the great big kudos. Like, that's some great big shoes that you just fulfilled and threw on him. But with that being said, I think the Steelers this whole draft pick, they kind of saw the wave hitting, and like those first 3 those 3 picks at first, I was sitting there licking my chops. I'm like, what? Aggressive? This is more aggressive than we have been ever. So I am licking my chops right now to see how well this all works out for us and it unfolds, man. Ben, he was my roommate for 5 years when I played. It's just good to see how much he has matured, not just as a quarterback, but off the field as a father, husband, and I'm looking for some great leadership qualities out of him, and giving these guys, paving the way for these guys to come up and take the reins and take the bull by the horn and lead the way. He is in a position right now where he is looking at his opportunities and saying, man, I hope we play, because when all this figures itself out with the COVID, he's going to have weapons galore, and I know him personally is excited about that.
I'm pretty confident he is. Do you ever speak to Ben? Have you been in contact with him about what's going on in the family?
I spoke to Ben last year. We talk we talk off and on. He was in and out of a town quite a bit last year, and him and I caught up a couple times. Jerome and I talk quite frequently. I'm playing golf with him next week. So Hines, we still keep a great base of guys that we kind of communicate throughout the year. And it's solid, man. That's the old Steeler way. I'll give you an example of how this organization just prides itself on just from the top go down. Jack Kearney. I can't tell you my name that I have for him because it's wrong.
I won't tell him.
Listen to this and laugh. Everyone knows his name, but he calls during this COVID stuff started unraveling. I'm in Florida, Miami, and he goes, I just wanted to know, are you okay? And I'm like thinking to myself, like, wow, that's the class that he said. The one thing that Mr. Rooney had always told me is, as long as every single player that plays for me feel like they were a part of our family, and they still are, that's all I care about. And that's the class of the Rudies. And he called every single one of the ex-players that day and made sure that we were all okay. So that's a kudos to this organization and what they represent and stand for.
Yeah, no, I have. I've been a fan for a long time. I was going to ask you about the whole golf game thing. Do you guys keep your social distance at 6 feet from the hole?
Oh, golf is the total social distance there is, man. I mean, what else, what else sport do you get to drive in your golf cart separately and hit balls? And it's totally competitive and everything. I know you watched
of course.
The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. You see how competitive he is, right?
Oh yes.
We took it up a little bit better and a little bit more of a notch whenever we play.
Nice. Well, you got to kick it up a notch. You guys have all the room to swing you could possibly imagine. It's 6 feet. That's like a lifeline right there.
Right. You don't want to get within my swing anyway.
Right. I may as well duck because I slice that every time I get a chance. Every time I get an opportunity, I'll just slice that ball, so forget about it. Of course, go to SimkovitzCranialInstitute.com. They're out of Wexford, PA. They can deal with whatever concussion issues and symptoms that you are facing, whether you're a new player, a retired player like Verron, or any other player. Just go they'll give you a free consultation. So you tell them the Rude Dog Show sent you, and they'll certainly take care of you. I want to move on to Alex Highsmith. I thought this was a very interesting and unique pick out of, again, a very small NCAA Division I school. Not a lot of conversation about Highsmith. I didn't hear anything about him in pre-draft conversations, pre-draft topics. But he is one of those defensive ends. Picked 102nd overall last year. What do you think about his physicality? A lot of rumors about him needing to add mass, needing to add weight. He played in 14 games, with the second most sacks in FBS play, which actually speaks a lot. And you have guys like Dabo Sweeney, head coach for the Clemson Tigers, stating he's the best player he has seen. But he's obviously facing an uphill battle at being an undersized 23-year-old player. Does he bulk up? Where does Alex Highsmith rank in regards to, is he going to see immediate rotation, or is he a guy that's going to sit in clipboard for most of the year while he bulks up?
Well, here's the thing. The interesting part of it is the Steelers usually and don't miss in the draft. And that's going back to Jerome. That's how they build their team. Historically, that's how the Steelers build their teams in the draft. And then the old guys, the veteran guys, teach the younger guys. Here's the interesting part of that. You look back at my draft class, you had a guy named James Harrison that that we brought into camp, and he turned out to be pretty well, whether it be bulking up, because James wasn't as big as he was when he came in. So he had time to excel and grow. Obviously, he gets cut a few times. They gave him a fire to burning desire to compete. But he ended up panning out pretty well. So when you go back to Smith, you gotta understand that right now, we have all the pieces in play. So where he fits in, I think he learns the system. He gets he get a chance to learn the system and grow within that system, get a comfortable familiarity with the players and what the coaches expect out of him. A little special teams action, which will be helpful, and then you get a understanding now. Somebody goes down, as you well know, is a contact sport and a collision sport, and now somebody goes down, you're able to fill in that void and play at a high level. With Dabo sending him those kudos and accreditation, trust me, that is not light. Dabo speaks his mind all the time, so I take that in account too. So I think he's going to turn out to be just the player that we want. This league has moved more so from a more physical league, more so into a fast pace, keeping up with the offense, being able to transition into the passing game. And I think he fits that mold.
I do as well. I actually like that pick. Very surprising pick for most analysts. And of course, they have certain players pegged based on certain parameters and analyses and things of that nature for teams and what position that they would fill. And I think that Alex Highsmith certainly has his work cut out for him as he bulks up. But I think you're right. I think the Steelers would certainly put him in a position for success to be that guy in the eventual rotation. I don't see him playing a whole lot other than just special teams unless someone goes down, and then he'll have that opportunity. Heaven forbid a player will go down. But I'll move on to the 4th round, 124th pick overall. Anthony Mcfarland, interesting guy out of Maryland. Haven't had a ton of success with some Terps. I hate to mention Sean Davis and all of that, but 2 different positions, 2 different players, 2 different guys. Similar system, but as a running back, 124th pick overall by the Steelers. There have been some other guys in regards to foot movement. You know what that's all about. A guy, he's a 440 and a 40 sprint. He was behind Javon Leak. He received more time on the line, 114 to 103, as well as catches, 17 18 outside from Leak. Where do you see Mcfarland fitting? The Steelers are loaded at the running back position between Jalen Samuels, between James Conner. This just adds to the laundry list of players. I mean, clearly 4th round, they're not going to cut him. Where do you see him fitting as a part of that rotation? Maybe you're looking at a dual back set with Ben taking a false snap and a handoff, pump fake. What are we talking about? And what do we expect from Anthony Mcfarland?
So here's you made up you just said an interesting point with Ben, right? I think you bring him back slowly. Obviously, he is a guy that would like to throw 100 times if he could in a game, but realistically, age and the fact that you were hurt, you bring him back slowly. So that first part of the season, until he's 100% comfortable and back in his element, I think you do have to have multiple backs, and you roll them and you keep them fresh. As long as we're all healthy, then you have to have a 3rd down running back in there. You have to have a guy that plays special team and a guy that can be a tweener as well. In my opinion, you go back to you have to have a guy that can play both fullback, tailback, and 3rd down running back. And I think he fits that mold.
Where I also see him actually fitting is setting him up on the outside, because he's so fast in that 40. You set him up in a situation where you're looking at 3rd and long, maybe 3rd and short, maybe a 4th down guy. He's got the physicality at 5'8" and 208. It's not as if he's going to get pummeled at the line. He's got some weight and mass to him, and clearly because of being 5'8" at 208, he's going to have to bulk up a little bit, but not a whole lot. But I see him maybe
get him the
3rd
ball
down,
in space where he could be effective, I think, and that right there fits into his game. Yes. Screen passes, all kinds of interesting formations where you can put him one-on-one on a smaller corner and just let him, or a slower one for that matter, and just let him beat him off the line.
Yeah, exactly. Because corners aren't very tall in this league; they're barely 6 foot. But at 5'8", he can basically reach over that corner if he really needs to. So 4th round, 135th overall. This is an interesting pick. This gentleman has some NFL lineage. And running track with his mom running track as well. Redshirt senior, started in 14 games in 2019. He was named a Sun Belt Conference all-newcomer team, so obviously he was a new insertion into there. Almost won, but named first-team All-American by AP, which actually speaks to his credit. His dad played football at the same alma mater as he did, Louisiana Lafayette. And his mother at McNeese State was a track runner, and 2 uncles who were former NFL players with a name like Dotson. Hopefully that'll ring some bells for those that are actually watching this right now. And of course, I'm Rudy Reyes here on the Rude Dog Show with former Steelers running back Verron Haynes, who's an absolute stud at his position, playing in the NFL for as long as he did. When we're talking about size, and of course there were a lot of rumors about him moving over to the center position in time to take over, again, an aging line, not to take anything away from from the offensive center right now, but for future reference, he's practicing in that position to take Pouncey's place in the eventuality of it all. What is his likelihood? What do you think about him in regards to where does he fit? Is he another sideline guy that's going to have to fill the shoes when that need is warranted by this offensive line?
So I see him learning from one of the absolute best in the game right now, and has been for quite some time in Pouncey, and a tough-nosed SOB, right? And that's the kind of mold that he comes from anyway. I think his whole family and his lineage speaks for itself. So he gets the chance to learn firsthand the Steelers way, of the way that we conduct business and we do take care of things. And he gets to break in, and also I see him playing a few games. You know, we're up a little bit, big, and you look at how this season is going to unfold with not a lot of preseason. Maybe you want to play that rotation later on to give the guys a little bit of a rest for longevity. You know, now you get the best out of Pouncey, and in a time that we're going to need it, which is postseason, longevity. So that's where I see him fitting in and kind of finding his way, because he's going to be there. He's going to be around. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 6'4", 310. The guy was a captain, 4-year starter. He has a skill set. He was ranked number 1 overall in interior lineman. He's got great hand placement. He knows pancake blocks backwards and frontwards. I mean, the guy is an absolute stud. I think a very intriguing pick for the Steelers, especially at one of the smallest, again, another small NCAA school, because at the end of the day, I've interviewed plenty of NAIA guys, Division II, Division III. They all bleed the same exact way. These guys are hungrier than your guys in your high-class FBS or FCS schools, like your USCs and your Bamas. And, you know, these guys are equally as hungry. So it would not surprise me at all for him to eventually be a starter. Clearly, training camp would be the proving grounds for that. But I'd like to see Kevin Dotson get a nod and maybe even move over to center. If he can learn something from Pouncey, I would probably say stick to him like glue, especially if you plan on playing that center position. No doubt about that. And then last and never least, of course, Antoine Brooks, safety from Maryland. I hate to bring up Sean Davis's name again, only for the simple fact that it just did not work out. It was not a system for him in the Steelers organization. Sean Davis had barely any action whatsoever. And the action that he did play, he was penalized for it in some manner, in some way, shape, or form. I take nothing away from him as a person, as a player, other than he needs to do some offseason work. And I think he will. I think eventually Sean Davis will become the player that I believe he can be. It'll just be for the Redskins, or I should say lack thereof, the team that has no name out of Washington right now. So with that being said, let's talk about Antoine Brooks for half a minute, and then we'll move over to Carlos Davis. 5'11", 220 safety, 198th pick overall by the Steelers. I like him. I like his physicality. He allowed 6.9, yards per target in a game, 35-inch vertical at the Indy Combine. Of course, Dotson, the aforementioned one, did not receive an invite. I don't know why he didn't receive one, but he didn't. But I think Antoine Brooks has a way to get into this safety position, especially in the nickel. I think he's great in the nickel. I've seen him play in Maryland. Do you see him breaking through in special teams for Antoine Brooks in the safety position, or is he immediate insertion into the nickel as the season starts?
I think you'll see him on the field in special teams first, and then eventually he will break into the nickel. He's a player that I like personally. I think it was a great, solid pick. You mentioned his physicality. I like the bigger safeties type dudes that go downhill, and he seems to fit the mold to me. Now, there is a transition period there where you'll know real quick whether he fits the void or not. And I personally think he'll unfold well. That secondary is filled with guys that's got some leadership roles there, and it seems like a great nucleus amount of guys there that will come together and kind of put their arms around him and get him up to speed quickly, because that's what it's going to need this year in particular for guys to catch up, especially younger guys, with the exception of OTAs and the training camps and the lack of. It's going to be a learn on the job quick, so to speak. And you're going to have to figure it out really quick. So this part of it is going to have to play a huge void in making this cut and making this team.
Yeah, no, he definitely has an uphill battle, and I think it's a make or break for Steelers safeties coming out of Maryland, being drafted out of Maryland, and again, if he can find a way to be an immediate insertion based on his play, based on his ability to pick up the NFL game speed, would be maybe the proving ground for him to get that starting spot, especially in the nickel. But we're going to have to see. It's going to, this is going to take place a lot sooner than later to determine whether or not he jumps from special teams into
Rudy, I'll give you an
lineup.
interesting scenario too. There's going to be so many hungrier players this year for the lack of what they are able to bring into training camp. You have to start at, I forget, 74 maybe. What are they starting at and whenever they start rolling? What was those numbers? Because it's not 90 anymore. I know that it's not. The picks are really limited in how many you could bring into camp. Whenever we start rolling, and that in itself is going to be like, you're not allowed to make as many MEs. That, for those that don't know, those are mental errors that get judged every single day, every single practice, on your accountability and your lack of, for that matter, and your learning curve. So they're going to be the fun aspect of it is cut down tremendously. Yeah, you're going to have your guys that are pretty locked in and solidified, but there's going to be some players out there that's going to be proving themselves very quickly, and right away who those guys are.
Yeah, they're going to stand out. And again, and just when you mentioned that, just really made me wonder exactly how did Sean Davis get through that. But that's another story for another time. And we really can't speak to that effect either. And perhaps he has changed that to go beyond just being a developmental player, but now has reached a point where he'll be effective in his position in his new home with a team that has no name in the NFL, being the only team that has no name other than the team out of Washington, D.C., as we mentioned. Last but not least, we have a seventh rounder. And usually seventh rounders don't typically last very long, especially in the Steelers organization. But
come on. My seventh rounder lasted a long time. Keys to Dees, baby.
Very far, few, and in between as Verron Haynes joins me here on the Rude Dog Show. I'm Rudy Reyes. But, I mean, no, seriously, you look at Carlos Davis. You lost, you lost a guy in Javon Hargrave. He had pretty good numbers. Redshirt senior, 4 sacks, 4.5 for loss last year. But because he couldn't win the one-on-one pass rushing battles, that's something he obviously will need to work on if he isn't already working on it right now to be effective, to at least be considered to not only work in a special teams capacity, but to be one of those eventual rotational guys as far as defense. I actually liked his pick out of Nebraska, very solid system there. But what I don't like is his inability to just get out of the way, to get off a double team, instead of being able to find a way. And of course, you have to have guys to compensate and offset for that if you're being double teamed in order to come up to make those stops or to do a pass deflection or something of that nature. But when I look at Carlos Davis, it's a relatively decent, fit. And of course, his brother Khalil Davis is a 3-year starting defensive player, also in the discus. So clearly, there is some athleticism via lineage, as we were talking about earlier. But because of the loss of Javon Hargrave, that puts him in a position as a defensive tackle to be part of that rotation. What is the likelihood of him being able to get off of those double teams? What does he have to work on in order to be considered just another player, another body on special teams?
Well, it's good. It's an uphill battle, right? Being a late round pick, I was a late round pick. It's an uphill battle. You know that going into it. So your focus is different. You're intentionally every day trying to prove a point and make the team. That's just what it is. Plain, point blank, simple. You're making the team each and every day that you're out there. And it's a come with your hard hat and go to work. And that's what his mindset has to be, that going into training camp and every day that he's there until you're able to find a niche in there in the system and a void that's needed. You got to come with your hard hat every day. It's an uphill battle. I think you need to get a little bit stronger, and that's, in the weight room, taking on those double teams is going to be big. You look at our defense in the past, all of our interior guys, that's what they've been able to do, free up our linebackers to let them run. And that's why the system is so effective. So, he gets in there, you learn from some really cool guys and some influential guys that played the position, that's their hands-on every day. You have a good nucleus. Like I said, that defense is solid of the way that we transpired last year and how we're evolving and the picks that we have picked up this year. I think we just keep on rolling. But you get in the weight room as much as you can. You check in as much as you can every single day. You're out there for one thing and one thing only, to prove yourself over and over every day.
Well, I hope Carlos Davis does, for a lot of reasons. I mean, he's 24. Usually that's a little bit older for a guy starting out.
But maybe the maturity is there at 24, right? You understand that you're at 22, where you was a little bit goofy. You have 2 years to get mature. That 2 years helps, man. I'm telling you, you see a great transition within those 2 years. So maybe he gets it. And I hope
he does. Maybe. I hope he does. Crossing fingers and toes, Carlos Davis will actually get it and make this roster, not only just being a body on that special team, line, but more importantly, being able to be that starter, be a part of that rotation. And if he could just pick up and learn and follow guys who have been there, done that in that position. You mentioned James Harrison. I want to go back to that for half a minute, because James Harrison was cut a few times, and that built that fire inside of him coming in undrafted. Now, what's interesting about James Harrison is that Carlos Davis could be in a very similar situation as well, being cut and then brought back again. I think the difference is that I think if Carlos Davis can not necessarily bulk up, but to become that much more athletic, get off of those double teams, and really recognize that it's going to take a lot of cardio. And some of these guys don't really deal with cardio very well. As we watched last night in the UFC prelims, some of these guys get winded real quick in a minute 30 into the first round. You're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do here? Is this not going to be fun anymore? I think Carlos Davis finds a way to build his athleticism as well as his cardio. I think he'll be a solid component and to prove everybody wrong. He, as far as grading these guys are concerned, and be the last component. So A through D, where would you give Carlos Davis?
A through D, I think right now he's a solid pick. I like the pick personally. I'll give him a C- right now, just because of the double team. In this defense, and that's no knock on him, but in this defense, you have to understand that your job requires you to get off that. That's essentially that you're paid to do, and do it at a high capacity every single time. Bring your hard hat. But he has some guys in front of him that he can learn the system very well. I mean, it's easy done. You just go watch film, sit, be a sponge. That's exactly what I did with Jerome. I mean, you have guys in there that has played at a high level for many years. Be a sponge. Always ask questions. Be a thorn and make them want to say, why are you at – let them turn you away. Right. You don't get turned away. You let them turn you away. And that's when you know you're doing a good job.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more with that one. Just be a student of the game. That'll get you a lot farther, to be much more methodical and to recognize your role and to earn that role at the same time. Going to Antoine Brooks. If there was anyone I would probably give a relatively decently high grade, especially in the 6th round. Now, this 2020 NFL draft had everything. It had athleticism. More guys were drafted in this draft with such a balance, with such an equilibrium on both sides of the ball in all three phases, in fact. And I take nothing away from special teams because those guys are special for a reason.
Yeah.
But I do like Antoine Brooks' pick. I appreciate his athleticism, his height we were talking about earlier. I'm gonna give him a B plus. And the reason why I'm giving him the plus is because he's going to have to prove himself, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of proving, even though he was drafted in the 6th round. Where does he stand for you?
He's a solid B for me. Solid B. That is one of the guys that I'm high on in this draft, and I like that pick. I like where he's at. I like the company he has around him, and I love the challenge that he's going to be able to accept. I think that's the solid pick, and you'll see a lot of him, too, here in the coming years.
Yeah, I do as well. Moving up to Kevin Dotson, he comes from a small school, but he was picked in the 4th round. That, again, kind of offsets. They could have done the switch, but I can guarantee you that Antoine Brooks may not have been there by the time they had made that pick. Somebody else would have actually grabbed him. Even though he's from a small school, I'm probably going to have to give this pick for Kevin Dotson a B minus. Why is a minus? Because the minus is the fact that it's a small school. But I give him a B because he has the DNA. He has the athleticism. He has the ability to play multiple positions. I can see that coming in this season, for the Steelers. If somebody goes, let's just say, heaven forbid, Matt Filer goes down, or Villanueva goes down, or anybody else. I mean, heck, heaven forbid, Pouncey goes down as well. That could be a big boost to that Steeler offensive line. So I'm giving him a B minus.
I'm giving him a B, Rudy. I give him a B, just simply because of the fact what the small school. I come from that era where give me in this day and age, a 3-star as opposed to a 5-star any day. Let me build my team with a guy that ego has something to prove than a guy who's been handed some stuff. I think they come and they check in every day in and day out. So for me, I think the small school factor plays a big role in me giving him a B.
Fair enough. Anthony Mcfarland, running back out of Maryland, in the 4th round. It's so tough to look at this guy. I've looked at demo reels. I've watched him play in the Terp system. I'm probably going to have to give. God, it's so hard to give grades on guys, even though you're watching him play in college, but you don't know if it's going to transition well into the NFL. So it's really kind of hard to put a letter grade on him. I'm probably going to have to give a solid B for him. Why? Because of his athleticism, because of his size, because of his wingspan, his mindset, the way that he can complement James Conner in the backfield in a 2-back set situation. So I'm going to go with a B for that reason. And I see him getting those outside passes from Ben to be able to convert on 3rd and long.
I'm giving him a B plus, simply because of the fact that as we start this season and it gets thrown to us very quickly whenever we do unroll everything with the COVID and the rules come to play and it's all honky-dory and we're back on the field, I see him fitting in there. With Ben being injured last year, I see a heavy run and multiple back system, throwing guys in there, short passes. This is what plays into his game in particular to me.
Yeah, Ben has always been great at understanding his checkdowns, but also to that effect, as well as I do, he'll hold on to that ball a little too long, trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, but guess what? That right there is where I used to make my living, because you knew playing into it, all you have to do was get open, because he's looking downfield, but his eyes is always scanning. And if you're in the open spot, he will find you. And if he can understand that about Ben, If he can understand that about Ben, he'll be sitting in good position come September, come December, as the season progresses. He'll understand, and they'll have a bond, a connection. And a lot of guys have been able to capitalize on that too in the past. And we could go back. That's for another segment. And I'll tell you one that
we're going to talk about that too.
Done that well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Alex Highsmith, we were talking about him earlier. I'm probably more intrigued with him than I am with Chase Claypool. And the reason why I say that is because it's a small school, but he has made his living with 60 tackles, 17.5 for loss. He's going to transition well. He's got the accolades from Dabo Sweeney. The guy's going to be that muscular, well fit, well thought out, educated football IQ guy. I see him being an absolute stud for the Steeler D, and I really see him as an A+. Yes. And I'm not going to give that high to Chase Claypool for that reason.
Right. I solid A right there. And then you add in there the accolades that comes with it. I see the plus right there, and a nod to him because he's a high IQ guy. And I think whenever this all unfolds, like we've been talking about, when this COVID stuff hit, the most essential part of this game being that we didn't have training camp, being that the OTAs and stuff was limited, being all of these factors is going to be the IQ part. And I think he presents a unique situation where he's able to excel on the field with very limited reps.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I want to see that transition. I want to see that weight transition, that weight build. I want to continue seeing the yield that I've seen from him. I think he's going to be an outstanding piece to the Steelers D for years to come, for Absolutely. Sure. I just hope they are able to work out that deal with Bud Duprees, speaking of defense. Yeah. Then last but not least, the second round pick being Chase Claypool. I'm going to have to give him an A for one solid reason. He's tough. He's rugged. He's knowledgeable. He'll drive someone into the ground like Superman. I mean, he's going to do those wide receiver, high wire act, almost Santonio Holmes types of catches in the end zone with a tippy toe tap, to get that, of course, years ago with Antonio Brown. You've seen that tiny toe tap in the end zone. And I think the Steelers stay traditional in regards to getting guys like this. I like the pick. He gets an A for me, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. Where does he sit for you?
A+. I think it was a sensational pick. I think right now you gave him his highest credits and kudos when you mentioned him in the category of Hines Ward. Like, when that right there is big shoes, and the importance of having a guy that's accountable, that knows that can give you those toe tappers, that can get open and create for himself in these times is going to be essential for Ben. And Ben knows how to find guys whenever they do that. And I think he fits that mold that we're looking for. And the other guy that's on the other side of him, he's pretty good too. So he's going to catch a few passes. We have a few guys that could create for themselves. I think this is another weapon that was needed and vital to our success on offense.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Last but not least, we're talking about Juju. I wanted to get back to that for half a second because Juju not targeted very well by Mason Rudolph, not targeted very well. Just lost Verron Haynes, but I think Juju Smith-Schuster will have a comeback year. I know most people probably aren't thinking that. They probably aren't in belief of that. But I think Juju Smith-Schuster will find ways to get open now that Ben Roethlisberger is back, because don't forget, he had a record amount of touches as he had seen from Ben Roethlisberger. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show. Thanks for tuning in. Go to SimkovicsCranialinstitute.com and get what you're looking for. If you have concussions, concussion symptoms, or anything related to concussions, go check them out. I'm Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show. Thank you so much for tuning in.